Hare Krishna. We are a little late because of a big mix up. Some persons thought I was speaking from the temple and others didn't. So I had to dash back from the temple to here. The temple, of course, is on the same property, so doesn't violate the lockdown protocols. Looking at the faces of those who are online. More are coming. So I guess even though I'm late, it's not a great setback because so many of you are late. I'm deciding what to speak about today on Lord Balaram's appearance day, at least in New Zealand. Tonight, New Zealand time, I'll be speaking for the UK, and it'll be the morning for them. I was turning through Nectar of Devotion, and I just decided I'm going to try and prove to devotees how nectarian is the Nectar of Devotion book, which, as you know, is a summary study of Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And this summary study by Srila Prabhupada has so many treasures in it. As we advance in bhakti, we become more and more aware of what's in Nectar of Devotion. In fact, Srila Prabhupada's instructions for reading Nectar Devotion are that just read it and there'll be a lot beyond your realization. But as you advance in bhakti, you'll be able to understand. Bells will ring in you. Let me get situated first. Take off my sweater or jumper, according to which country you're from. Okay. Jai Baladev. Shri Balarama Ji ki Jai.
Right.
As many of you know, there's practically no difference between Krishna and Balaram. Except Krishna is bluish, Balaram is whitish, and Krishna generally wears a yellow cloth and Balaram likes blue. More or less, that's the difference. Balaram is Krishna's first expansion, and they're very close. In Vrindavan Leela, Balaram is acting more or less as Krishna's equal. More or less. Mostly. But in Mathura and Dwarka Leela, Balaram assumes more of a role of an older brother. Today we can beg Lord Balaram for the spiritual strength to carry out Krishna's instructions. Sometimes when you read Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, you think, how will I ever be able to do this? How will I ever be able to transcend the bodily concept of life? How will I rid myself of lust, anger, greed, madness, envy, illusion? And for those doing outreach or who want to do outreach, we're thinking, how will I get the strength to carry out the Sankirtan mission, spreading Krishna's glories to every town and village? That is the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. For all those items, our own daily sadhana, our attempts to chant with attention, our attempts to cooperate with other devotees, all these things sometimes can seem very difficult. Those of you who are householders have to deal with so many practicalities, things to do with the home, things to do with the children, things to do with work. There's only so much time in the day. And so you wonder, where does the strength come from to carry on? We can appeal today to Lord Balaram. Bala, not physical strength does Bala mean, but spiritual strength. He gives the strength to carry out Krishna's instructions. And that strength is coming to us through parampara. On our own, we're all very tiny, tiny little sparks. And without good association, the tiny spark can go out. But in good association, inspiring bhakti association, the spark can retain its original or revive its original fiery quality. So we're in a precarious position. Let's be realistic. Material existence is a precarious, or as I say in this part of the world, it's a dodgy situation. Things are very, well, again, precarious. The example given in the song, Bhaja Hore Mana, just like a drop of water is balanced on a petal of a lotus flower. Any moment, that drop can fall off. So we're like that in material existence, surrounded by so many complexities, sometimes adversities, sometimes perplexities. Happiness and distress are assaulting us from all directions. How do we get the strength to handle that? Well, we know how to take Sri Krishna Prasad. No one has any doubts about that strength-giving program. But you may wonder, how can I push on from day to day? Anyone who's honestly chanting the Hare Krishna mantra is aware of how much more progress we always need to make. We're eternally in pursuit of the Hare Krishna mantra. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself indicates, I'm so unfortunate. I have no attraction for chanting Hare Krishna, no raga. And he's the supreme chanter of Hare Krishna. So yes, chanting Hare Krishna is humiliating. And we can't stand that, right? We want to be achievers, accomplishers, champions. And when you try to chant Hare Krishna with attention, oh, it's so humbling, humiliating. We can just cry out in helplessness, like a child calling for mother. And that's the proper attitude for chanting Hare Krishna. Like a child taking shelter of mother. Just like now I can see the little lad, Dinanath, taking shelter of his mother Dinadayala. So that's how we want to take shelter of the Hare Krishna mantra. He's sure that on his mother's lap, everything he needs is supplied. When will we have that kind of conviction for chanting Hare Krishna? So, yes, today we beg for spiritual strength from Lord Balaram. So, I began speaking about nectar of devotion, and I decided just to prove to you how nectarian is nectar of devotion, I'll just turn to the index under Balaram or Baladev. And I know the first entry. I don't know all of them by heart, but I know the first entry. Balaram advising Krishna to stay home. Now, you see, Balaram has fraternal rasa with Krishna, friendship, sakyaras. But there's also mixed in some parental or vatsalya prem and some servitude, some dasya prem. So in this case, Balaram, although his main relationship is friendship, he's acting with a bit of parental concern. He's saying, Krishna, don't go to Kaliya Lake today. I want you to stay home. It's your birthday, Mother Yashoda, and I want to bathe you. So you might say, well, what is this? Balaram is being so assertive. I know this incident, but I'd still like to read to you from Nectar Devotion, if you don't mind. Baladev's affection for Krishna is illustrated in this statement to Subal. Subal, as you know, is one of the main cowherd boys in Braj. He's very intimate with Krishna as a cowherd boy, so much so that Subal can actually be the communications link with Krishna's gopis. So Baladev says to Krishna, my dear friend, excuse me, Baladev says to Subal, got that? He's speaking to Subal, one of the cowherd boys. My dear friend, please inform Krishna not to go to Kaliya's lake today. Today is his birthday, and so I wish to go along with Mother Yashoda to bathe him. Tell him he should not leave the house today. So Prabhupada explains, this shows how Balaram, Krishna's elder brother, took care of Krishna with parental love within the scope of fraternal affection. See, sometimes there are mixtures of rasas in Vrindavan, but there's always the main flavor, and other flavors are minor, not the major. Then we have another case in the Brahma Vimohana Leela, when Krishna bewilders Lord Brahma by assuming forms as the cowherd boys and calves to replace those that Brahma confiscated. So, you know how Balaram responded. Even Balaram couldn't know what Krishna was up to by Krishna's arrangement. for 1 year. Such strange things were going on in Vrindavan. Everyone was loving the calves and the boys just like they were loving Krishna. So gradually, Balaram started to catch on in successive phases. He was wondering, what is this? Everyone is loving their son, and the cows are loving their calf, just like the calves and the sons were Krishna. What's going on here? So what he's saying, as pointed out in Nectar of Devotion, what he's thinking is that all these calves and cowherd boys are stimulating my ecstatic love as if they were Krishna. Now, what's this? We'll read from Nectar of Devotion. Lord Krishna, who is the possessor of inconceivable potencies and qualities of transcendental knowledge and bliss, is the basic cause of ecstatic love. He's the object of love. Lord Krishna also becomes the reservoir or the impetus of ecstatic love by his different incarnations and expansions. So get this, he's both the recipient, the object of love, but he also stimulates love. He becomes the impetus for love. And that's what Balarama is going to notice is going on in Vrindavan. In Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a statement in connection with the Brahma Vimohana Leela, which demonstrates something of this impelling or impetus giving feature of ecstatic love. Focus on the impetus giving nature of ecstatic love. Not simply Krishna receiving, but he's impelling. When Brahma was deluded by Krishna, who expanded himself into so many cowherd boys, calves, and cows, Krishna's elder brother, Sri Baladev, a direct expansion of Krishna himself, felt astonishment and said, "How wonderful it is that my ecstatic love for Krishna is again being attracted to so many cowherd boys, calves, and cows." He was struck with wonder by thinking in this way. This is one of the examples in which Krishna himself becomes the object and reservoir of ecstatic love in the impelling aspect. So you're all thinking about this impelling aspect. Balaram's feeling the impelling nature of Krishna, even though these are what everyone thinks are just calves and cows and cowherd boys of Vrindavan. Remember, Krishna in the Brahma Vimohana Leela took the place of all these calves, cows, and cowherd boys. So they're all Krishna. They're not Jiva. They're not part and parcel living entities. So therefore, Balaram's wondering, I'm feeling impelled in ecstatic love by these calves, cowherd boys, cows. What's going on here? And as you may recall from Krishna book or reading the Bhagavatam, Balaram was going through a checklist. Now, what could be going on here? Am I being bewildered by some kind of Rakshashi, some kind of demoniac witch? No, not possible. I'm Balaram. No witch can bewilder me with her mystic power. Gradually, in successive stages, as the Yoga Maya potency began to recede. Balaram started to figure out what's going on. This is all done by my brother, and I could not detect it. And then Krishna filled him in. I've told that pastime many times. I love saying it again and again, but you've all heard it from me, most of you, so many times. The successive stages of Balaram's realizing what's going on, what his brother has done. So let's look at the next. Bluish due to Shankashura. Shankashura is also known as Shankachuda. And I think I'm going to speak more about that pastime in my next session for the UK, which New Zealand time will be 6:30 p.m. It's an interesting pastime where you see teamwork between Krishna and Balaram. I'll give you a advanced tickler for those of you who are able to tune in later. It's a nighttime in the spring pastime. It's right around the time that we call Balarama Purnima. And it's also what we call Holi. It's in the forest in the night. So many young gopis and Krishna and Balaram are there. On one hand, it appears to be a merge, but the acharyas point out that there are actually two parties because Balaram always has his party of girlfriends and Krishna has his. They don't mix in that way, but because of the way the Leela is presented, there's so many of them, so it's referred to as one group, one happening. So just a brief mention from Nectar Devotion here. When the Shankasura demon was attacking Krishna's queens, not the queens in Dwarka, but the young cowherd girls of Vrindavan. When the Shankasura demon was attacking Krishna's queens, one after another, Lord Baladev became more and more bluish. Now, we're going to hear later how Balaram is described in Nectar Devotion as having the complexion of an autumn white cloud. So those of you in New Zealand, in the land of the long white cloud, when you see a very whitish cloud hanging in the sky, you can think of Lord Balaram's complexion, except in very rare incidents when he turns bluish. So again, I think I'll talk about Shankasura or Shankachuda later today. But yes, the bodily appearance of Lord Baladev. I already spoke a bit of it. I will read to you from Nectar Devotion. One devotee described the personal beauty of Baladev as follows. Let me take shelter of the lotus feet of Balaram, whose beauty is enhanced by the earrings touching his cheeks. His face is decorated with tilak, made from kasturi, musk, and his broad chest is decorated with a garland of gunja. Those are small conch shells. His complexion is as white as an autumn cloud. He wears garments of blue color, and his voice is very grave. His arms are very long, touching his thighs, and he has shown his great strength by killing the Palamba demon. That's another Leela in which Krishna and Balaram teamed up. And what happened was Krishna covered Balaram's potencies so that Pralamba would want to tangle with Balaram and Balaram would get the honors. So Krishna made himself appear most powerful one, and he covered Balaram's power. So Pralamba thought, yeah, I'll go for him. He's less powerful. So in that way, Balaram could enjoy dispatching the Palamba Sura. Let me take shelter of this chivalrous Balaram. So now we're going to hear about Balaram's club. He's famous for wielding his club. The club, sometimes on its own, Balaram's club shows reverence to Krishna. Balaram himself, sometimes this happens. He shows respect, reverence to his younger brother. So listen, even Balaram, the elder brother of Krishna, sometimes unknowingly offered respect to him. This is not a usual thing, in other words. Respect means reverence, awe and reverence. Once, when Lord Krishna came before Lord Balaram, Krishna was anxious to offer his respects to his elder brother. But at that time, Balaram's club was lowered down upon Krishna's lotus feet. In other words, the club in Balaram's hand offered its own respects to Krishna. These feelings of subordination, as explained above, are sometimes manifested as anubhava. So the club made its own respects to Krishna's feet by lowering at Krishna's feet, regardless of Balaram. Meanwhile, Krishna is anxious to offer his respects to his elder brother, but the club of the older brother bows down on its own. As I said, Balaram's famous for his club fighting. In Dwarka Leela, he dispatched Rukmi, the brother of Rukmini, just by a blow from his club. Krishna has his chakra, Sudarshan chakra. Balaram likes to use the club. I just finished. The cooling effect of Balaram. What could that be? Again, this involves Shankasura, or also known as Shankachuta. How could Balaram have a cooling effect? Another instance is described as follows. On one side of the courtyard, the dead body of Shankasura was lying, surrounded by many jackals. On another side were many learned brahmanas who were all self-controlled. They were offering nice prayers, which were as soothing as the cool breeze in summer. In front of Krishna, Lord Baladev was standing, causing a cooling effect. But even amid all these different circumstances of soothing and disturbing effects, the lotus flower of ecstatic conjugal love that Krishna felt for Radharani could not wither. This love of Krishna for Radharani is often compared to a blooming lotus. The only difference is that Krishna's love remains ever increasingly beautiful. So you have a mixture of circumstances here. Dead body of Shankasura lying on the ground. Another aspect present in the scene is many learned brahmanas, all self-controlled, offering nice prayers, soothing as a cool breeze in the summer. And then in front of Lord Krishna, Balaram is standing, issuing a cooling effect. In spite of all this going on, the love between Krishna and Radharani is not affected in terms of reducing in any way. So there are a lot of elements in Krishna's pastimes. The Leelas have many aspects, many depths, many tangents. And when you first read Nectar Devotion, you might not take it so significantly. Okay, the body of the demon Shankasura is lying on the ground. Yeah. Brahmanas are offering prayers. Yeah. Prayers have a cooling effect. Okay. Balaram is there in front of Krishna giving a cooling effect. Yeah. But the more you read Nectar Devotion, the more you become sensitive to these flavors and permutations of flavors in the spiritual world. Material life desensitizes us toward Krishna because we're intent on being the enjoyer and the controller. In our futile attempt to imitate Krishna, we become desensitized. By reading Nectar Devotion a little bit every day, gradually, year after year, year by year, your sensitivity starts to return. So again, Srila Prabhupada's instruction for us about Nectar Devotion is just read it. He said, don't write him letters. Prabhupada, what is this? Prabhupada, what is that? Nectar Devotion requires realization through devotional service. It's not a book that's conquered by some kind of theological prowess, academic ability. It's a book, it's Rupa Goswami's gift to us, rendered by Srila Prabhupada. It's a book that requires devotional service so that we can assimilate it. What's on Krishna's mind? Sometimes even Balaram doesn't know. You heard that about the Brahma Mohana Leela, about the bewilderment of Lord Brahma, and that bewilderment even extended to Balaram. Balaram couldn't figure out what was happening for a whole year. But Krishna has a quality known as gravity. And Balaram is used as an example to highlight Krishna's gravity. This is in the chapter called Qualities of Sri Krishna. Grave, the 26th quality of Krishna. A person who does not express his mind to everyone, or whose mental activity and plan of action are very difficult to understand, is called grave. After Lord Sri Krishna had been offended by Brahma Brahma prayed to him to be excused. But in spite of his offering nice prayers to Krishna, Brahma could not understand whether Krishna was satisfied or still dissatisfied. In other words, Krishna was so grave that he did not take the prayers of Brahma very seriously. Those prayers are in the 14th chapter of the 10th canto. And after Brahma delivers such extraordinarily exquisite prayers, Krishna is thinking, who is this four-headed Brahma offering me such prayers? I'm just a cowherd boy in the village of Vrindavan. So Brahma couldn't figure out, is he satisfied or is he not? Now, in terms of Balaram, another instance of Krishna's gravity is found in connection in his love affairs with Radharani. Krishna was always very silent about his love affairs with Radharani. So much so that Baladev, Krishna's elder brother and constant companion, could not understand the transformations of Krishna on account of his gravity. So you get it. Even Balaram couldn't figure out what was going on between Krishna and his dearest devotee in terms of how the relationship affected Krishna. This is an example of being grave. Even your immediate expansion, Balaram, can't get to the bottom of your ecstatic transformations, what's going on in your in Krishna's private affairs. Now, as I mentioned briefly before, in Braj Leela, Krishna has his set of cowherd girls and Balaram has his, and they have their dancing in different spots. Okay, what comes next? The defeat of Balaram by Sri Dhamma in terms of mock fighting. That's something the cowherd boys love to do. Battles in the forest. Listen to this. Because Balaram apparently is defeated. But remember, it's all for play. It's all for pleasure. As the cowherd boys play in the forest, who is victorious over whom is not the point. The point is to have supreme pleasure.
Hare Krishna. Just a quick announcement. We're going to end the live stream on Facebook because they're going to start live streaming the Abhishek, but class can continue on Zoom and on the YouTube. So if anyone's watching on Facebook, they can jump over to Krishna Kata Auckland YouTube channel to continue hearing the class, or they can watch it later. Thank you. I saw you can continue. The class can go longer now, so there's no time restraint.
Once Krishna was watching Sri Dhamma very expertly using his stick to fight with Balaram, who was an expert club fighter. Remember about the club paying its own obeisances? Balaram's club paying obeisances spontaneously to Krishna. So Balaram, as we discussed, is the expert club fighter. And of course, he was famous for killing Pralambasura with his club. And he was famous for dispatching Rukmi with his club. So now, Sri Dhamma is just using a small stick. And apparently, he's defeated Balaram. We can read. When Krishna saw Balaram finally defeated by Sri Dhamma, who was using only a small stick, Krishna became filled with pleasure and began to look upon Sri Dhamma with great wonder. Krishna looking at Sri Dhamma with great wonder. What have you done? Amazing, astonishing. In this instance, there is a mixture of astonishment, fraternity, and chivalry in devotional service. The fraternity and chivalry are considered the parts, and the astonishment is considered the whole. You'll learn more about those various components as you go deeper into nectar devotion and deeper into your spiritual life. Nectar devotion is preventing us from being impersonalists. Now, we all want flavors from relationships in the material world, but we would never dream that the relationships in the spiritual world have, at the top most portion of the spiritual world, have so many flavors, mixtures. Okay, defeated Krishna in play. As we said before, it's not so much victory or defeat that's important in Braj Leela. What's important is the supreme pleasure. Rama is another name for Balaram, one who gives pleasure through pastimes. Oh, this is funny. This is a further feature of ecstatic love for Krishna. And what is that further feature of ecstatic love for Krishna? Envy. Sometimes people ask, is there envy in the spiritual world? There's not envy like we know it. Everything in Krishna's pastimes by his devotees increases Krishna's pleasure. So listen, for the example of envy in purity. Sometimes when the cowherd boys used to play in the forest of Vrindavan, Krishna would play on one side and Balaram would play on another. There would be competition and mock fighting between the two parties. And when Krishna's party was defeated by Balaram, the boys would say, if Balaram's party remains victorious, then who in the world can be weaker than ourselves? This is another instance of envy in ecstatic love. You can all meditate on that. If Balaram's party remains victorious, then who in this world is weaker than ourselves? Another example is given about the gopis and Srimati Radharani. But this is Balaram's appearance day, so we'll focus on Balaram. Just thought I would tease you a bit there. But on your own, you'll read Nectar Devotion. Next, we have an example of Indra crying. Why is he crying? Because Krishna is playing his flute. And that flute playing is affecting even the higher planets. In the Vidagdha Madhava, that's a book by Rupa Goswami, there's the following statement. When Krishna was playing on his flute, Baladev very anxiously declared, just see, after hearing the transcendental sound of Krishna's flute, Indra, the king of heaven, is crying in his heavenly kingdom. And from his teardrops falling on the ground, Vrindavan appears to have become a celestial residence for the demigods. Of course, Vrindavan is much more than the celestial residence for the demigods. The demigods planetary system is part of the material world, but Vrindavan is not part of the material world. But it's a way of glorifying Vrindavan. And Balarama is speaking like that. He's using examples that are considered topmost in the material world in order to glorify Vrindavan, which is out of the material world. So in the material world, people think, oh, Indra, the heavenly planets, how great. But he's saying when Krishna plays his flute, Indra is crying on his heavenly planet, and the teardrops are falling on the ground, making Vrindavan appear to have become a celestial residence for the demigods. And of course, as we said, Vrindavan is far beyond the mortal scope of the devotees, the demigods. So now we'll go to a section briefly describing Balaram's dress, which is bluish. What happens to it? He's famous for his blue dress, just like Krishna's famous for his yellow dress. This is another quality of Krishna, number 43, all famous. When the great sage Narada was chanting the glories of the Lord, the bluish line on the neck of Lord Shiva disappeared. Upon seeing this, Gauri, the wife of Lord Shiva, suspected Lord Shiva of being someone else disguised as her husband. And out of fear, she immediately left his company. Now, what about Balaram? Upon hearing the chanting of Krishna's name, Lord Balaram saw that his dress had become white, although he was generally accustomed to a bluish dress. And the cowherd girls saw all the water of the Yamuna River turn into milk. So they began to churn it into butter. In other words, by the spreading of Krishna consciousness or the glories of Krishna, everything became white and pure. Let's see what else what other gems we can find for you. Oh, this is funny. Yes. This is in the chapter entitled Further Features of Ecstatic Love for Krishna. What is one of those further features of ecstatic love? Sleepiness. But not the sleepiness like we know. Listen to this. Once Lord Baladev began to talk in his sleep as follows. Oh, lotus-eyed Krishna, your childhood adventures are manifest simply according to your own will. Therefore, please immediately dispose of the stubborn pride of this Kaliya serpent. There you have it. Balaram talking in his sleep. By saying this, Lord Baladev astonished the assembly of the Yadus and made them laugh for some time. Evidently, the Yadus, some or other, were witnessing Balaram talking in his sleep. But it goes on. After talking in his sleep and saying that, then yawning so hard as to make ripples on his abdomen, Lord Baladev, the bearer of the plow, returned to his deep sleep. You can try that. I don't know what it looks like. Yawning so hard as to make ripples on your abdomen. Yeah, do it. So Balaram, after displaying this ecstasy of sleepiness, talking in his sleep, then yawns in such an extraordinary way, and that goes back to deep sleep. So Prabhupada points out this is an instance of sleepiness in ecstatic love. We've spoken about Balaram's club. Very important. It's a paraphernalia he's famous for. He also carries a plow. That's why he has the name Haladara, the one who carries a plow. And when I speak to the Gita Nagari farm community, I'll talk more about Balaram and his plow and how Balaram is Krishi Raksha, land protection, and Krishna is Goraksha, cow protection. So I'll explain more at that time how Krishna always carries a rope on his shoulder for binding the back legs of the cow so the cow can be milked peacefully without kicking. And what does Balaram always carry? A plow for plowing the land, showing that he's in charge of land protection. Krishna's in charge of cow protection. So as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Krishi Goraksha Vanijam Vaishya Karma Swabhavajam. The activities of the Vaishyas, the real merchants. Real merchants are farmers, according to Krishna. Their activities consist primarily of cow protection and land protection. Then we have a case of Balaram's angry stare. Perhaps you can remember staring at someone with complete wrath. I hope it's just a brief moment. Balaram's hot eyes when he's angry are famous. Here's one example. When Jarasandha angrily attacked the city of Mathura, he looked at Krishna with sarcastic glances. At that time, Baladev took up his plow weapon and gazed upon Jarasandha with colored eyes. His eyes were red with anger. Everything Balaram does is significant. When his eyes turn color, when he talks in his sleep, when he yawns. This is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. Nothing is insignificant. Nothing is inconsequential. What about, we talked about envy, we've talked about anger, we talked about ecstasy and sleepiness. What about intoxication? Such an essential activity in today's life. What's the origin of the intoxicated state? Bhagavatam informs us, Janmadi Yasyataha, the absolute truth, is that from which everything emanates. So in the ultimate source, there must be romance, there must be combat, and there must be intoxication. Let's hear about that. It's very interesting. But you'll hear Prabhupada explain that Rupa Goswami doesn't get too much into it. Descriptions of intoxication. Because, well, there's no necessity for such discussion. Sorry, folks. But we'll read what is there. What is there? Always remembering that the pastimes of Krishna and Balarama are unlimited. When one becomes arrogant with false prestige due to drinking intoxicants or being too lustful, the voice becomes faulty, the eyes become swollen, and there are symptoms of redness on the body. There is a statement in the Lalita Madhava that Lord Baladev, intoxicated from drinking excessive quantities of honey, once began to address the ants. Oh, you king of the ants, why are you hiding yourself? Oh, you kings of the ants, why are you hiding yourselves in these holes? At the same time, Balaram also addressed the king of heaven. O King Indra, you plaything of Shachi. That's Indra's wife. Why are you laughing? I am now prepared to smash the whole universe. And I know that Krishna will not be angry with me. Then he addressed Krishna. My dear Krishna, tell me immediately why the whole world is trembling and why the moon has become elongated. Balaram's really intoxicated. And oh, you members of the Yadu dynasty, why are you laughing at me? Please give me back my liquors made of honey from the kadamba flower. As I said, Janmada Yasata, everything originates in the supreme absolute truth. Srila Rupa Goswami prays that Lord Balaram will be pleased with all of us while he is thus talking just like an intoxicated person. You would never think that you would ask the blessings of someone, hoping they'll be pleased with you while they're talking in the madness of intoxication. But for Balaram, yes, we beg, please be pleased upon us in your intoxicated state. Addressing the ants, why are you hiding in your holes? Addressing Indra, you plaything of your wife. I'm ready to smash the whole universe. No one can stop me. I know Krishna won't mind if I smash the whole universe. Yadu dynasty, why are you laughing at me? Give me back my liquors made of honey from kadamba flowers. Now, another quality of Krishna is he's shy, he's bashful. And you'll see that in reference to Balaram. Krishna thinks that Balaram might know his secret thoughts. And so he was bashful. What are those secret thoughts? Krishna didn't want Balaram to know. This is more intimate than the Brahma Vimohana Leela, where Krishna hid from Balaram how he had replaced the calves, cows, and cowherd boys. So this is in the qualities of Sri Krishna further explained. Shy. A person who sometimes exhibits humility and bashfulness is called shy. As described in the Lalita Madhava, another book by Rupa Goswami, Krishna's shyness was manifested when he lifted Govardhan Hill by the little finger of his left hand. All of the gopis were observing Krishna's wonderful achievement, and Krishna was also smiling at seeing the gopis. When Krishna's glance went over the breasts of the gopis, his hand began to shake. And upon seeing his hand shake, all the cowherd men underneath the hill became a little disturbed. Remember, Krishna had invited the whole village of Vrindavan to come under the Govardhan hill after Krishna lifted it. But now the hill is shaking because Krishna is eyeing certain aspects of the forms of the gopis. But it doesn't end there. Then there was a tumultuous roaring sound because the hill was shaking. And all the cowherd people began to pray to Krishna for safety because the hill is shaking. And you know why the hill is shaking? Because Krishna is looking at something very attractive. At this time, Lord Balaram was smiling, thinking that these cowherd men, now get this, Balaram is smiling, thinking that the cowherd men have been frightened by the shaking of Govardhan Hill. Balaram is smiling because he knows Krishna is invincible. It's just his pastime to make the hill shake. So he's smiling. What are they worried about? What is Krishna thinking when he sees Balaram smile? What's Krishna thinking? But seeing Balaram smile, Krishna thought that Balaram had understood his mind in observing the breasts of the gopis, and he immediately became bashful. There's another incident of Krishna, little Krishna, Bal Gopal, running to Balaram on his stealing, Krishna's stealing. This is in the chapter called Laughing Ecstasy. There's been sleeping ecstasy, there's been intoxication ecstasy, now there's laughing ecstasy. When one is smiling, but his teeth are not visible, one can distinctly mark a definite change in the eyes and in the cheeks. This is called smita, smiling. Just like we have our smita kanti, Devi Dasi. So smita is smiling. Once, when Krishna was stealing yogurt, Jarati, the head mistress of the house, could detect his activities, and she was therefore coming very hurriedly to catch him. At that time, Krishna became very much afraid of Jarati and went to his elder brother Baladev. He said, "My dear brother, I have stolen yogurt. Just see, Jarati is coming hurriedly to catch me." "My dear brother, I've stolen yogurt. She's coming to get me." When Krishna was thus seeking the shelter of Baladev because he was being chased by Jarati, all the great sages in the heavenly planets began to smile. This smiling is called smita. Smita smiling. Nectar Devotion will go on to explain there are other types of smiling, like hasita smiling, smiling in which the teeth are slightly visible. Whereas this smita smiling is when you smile, but your teeth are not visible, but someone can detect a distinct change in your eyes and your cheeks, even though your teeth are not visible. You see how detailed Rupa Goswami's presentation is, letting you know the spiritual world is full of endless variety. We're so attached to material varieties. We want to be entertained. We want to be fulfilled. But as we read Nectar Devotion, we see nothing compares to the real varieties and their master, Krishna. And of course, Balaram is Krishna's first expansion. So Balaram is always Krishna's well-wisher. And we spoke about how he didn't want Krishna to go to the Kaliya lake. He's telling that, remember, to Subal. Tell him stay back. Mother Yashoda and I want to bathe him because it's his birthday. So he's assuming a parental role, which is subordinate to his primary relationship of fraternity, Sakyarasa. We discussed in the beginning about Balaram's mixed relationship. Srila Rupa Goswami states herein that according to some learned scholars, the three kinds of transcendental mellow so far described, namely servitude, fraternity, and parental affection, are sometimes mixed. For example, the fraternal feelings of Balaram are mixed with servitude and parental affection. And we spoke in the very beginning how in Braj Leela, especially in the childhood pastimes, you see Krishna and Balaram acting more or less equal. But in Mathura and Dwarka, remember, we spoke about how the relationship becomes more of Balaram acting like the elder brother. So I hope that we've given you some impetus to read Nectar of Devotion, not overlook it. I think that sometimes devotees forget it. But during the days in ISKCON when Prabhupada was physically present, every evening there would be Bhagavad Gita class and Nectar Devotion class. And what would happen is that the speaker would read from Nectar Devotion for 10 minutes, maybe comment on it a little bit, take some questions, and then would go to Bhagavad Gita. So this was the common practice. It may be that over the course of time, the emphasis on Nectar Devotion has diminished. Of course, if you're studying Bhakti Shastri, you definitely read Nectar Devotion. But it's a book that needs to be looked at regularly because your appreciation of it, as we explained, will increase. Your realization of it will increase as your service attitude develops. So I just wanted to stimulate your appetite on Balaram's appearance day. I hope you've gotten an insight into the glories of Nectar Devotion, Srila Prabhupada's rendition of Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. One of the many tasks that I'm trying to do is, on behalf of the BBT, work on a well done version of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It'll be like 5 volumes. But we already have Prabhupada's Nectar Devotion. But devotees often like to see the points in Nectar Devotion as they're in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, because the size of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the original, will be much bigger. Prabhupada gave us a summary study. Sometimes devotees who like reading, they want, let's see how Rupa Goswami expanded upon this point. But for most of you, working as householders with family, nectar devotion, if you read that again and again, you'll benefit so much. All right. So I thank you all for your kind attention. And it's really been wonderful talking about Lord Balaram. I'm looking at all the faces. I see my sister present, keeping an eye on me. If anyone wants to see, if you can see on the bottom of your screen, you'll see someone named Linda. She's offering pranams. We hope that soon I won't have to call her Linda. So let us continue begging today for Lord Balaram's mercy. New Zealand time tonight at 6:30. I'll be giving class for parts of the UK, especially Wales. And then Sunday evening, I'll be giving a class for Gita Nagari, and I'll be stressing probably more the agricultural aspects of Lord Balaram to enliven the inhabitants of the cowherd village of Gita Nagari. All right, I'm looking at all the faces. This is how I get my association during lockdown. I know you Americans and Canadians think it's crazy. In New Zealand, they locked the whole country down after finding one case of COVID. I think over the days, it's up to 50 now or so. These are very unsettled times for all parts of the world, and everyone needs to do what they can do to be safe. Srila Prabhupada said, first is health and sadhana. So keep that in mind. Again, looking at the faces. In mind. All right. Shri Balarama Ji ki. Jai Baladev. Give us spiritual strength to carry Krishna's instructions. Hare Krishna.
Hare